Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive stack of sociological research, and we're going to absolutely deconstruct the architecture of exploitation used by some of the most infamous networks in history. We're talking about groups led by figures like Charles Manson, Jeffrey Epstein, and Keith Rainier of NXIVM. We're really going to look closely at how these traps are actually built from the ground up.
To start us off, I want you to picture a bank heist. When we think about a bank robbery, we usually look for obvious physical evidence, right? We look for shattered glass, a blown vault door, maybe a forced entry. But I want to pose a question here. What if, instead, the thief didn't break in at all? What if they just walked up, handed the bank manager a really impressive resume, and the manager simply opened the vault for them?
So that's the absolutely crucial point we need to establish. Modern psychological capture is not a violent break-in. There is no shattered glass. It is entirely an inside job. The vault is opened from within, and often willingly at first. And to understand exactly how that happens, we need to completely rethink who these groups are actually targeting.
Section 1, the myth of the gullible. Let's rethink victims.
You know, we have this massive societal myth that predators only target weak, uneducated, or supposedly gullible people. But the research reveals a truly startling reversal. The reality is that these predators systematically target highly intelligent, highly ambitious women. Instead of looking for weakness, they actually weaponize a brilliant person's very drive for self-actualization right against them. You'd think intellect would act as a shield, but think about it. Highly ambitious people are profoundly accustomed to pushing past their own boundaries and ignoring their own discomfort just to achieve big goals. We applaud that trait in universities and everyday professional life, but it is exactly the trait a predator exploits.
And this brilliantly illustrates a pretty dark truth. To run a complex, sprawling hierarchy, these organizations don't just want intelligent people. They actively need their skills. It's literally an operational necessity. They rely on their targets' high-level executive functioning to organize logistics, run shell companies, things like that. They need robust social capital to legitimize the group to outsiders and recruit more high-value members. And of course, they need significant financial resources to keep their complex networks afloat. So that is exactly who they're hunting.
Section 2, bypassing the alarm bells. Let's look at how they silence the danger.
So cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is a widely respected psychological framework for reframing negative thoughts. But groups like Keith Rainier's NXIVM lured in executives and actresses by taking this completely legitimate tool and totally weaponizing it. Imagine you're an executive in one of these groups, and you start questioning why the leader is making unreasonable demands on your time or your money. Well, instead of addressing the concern, they use this therapy to reframe it. They tell you, oh, your frustration is just a limiting belief. It's your ego resisting true enlightenment. Suddenly, your totally rational discomfort is spun into a personal flaw that you need to overcome. It acts as this massive psychological Trojan horse, completely disguised as female empowerment and corporate networking.
But to ensure those internal alarm bells never fire in the first place, predators need a familiar face to bypass your primal instincts. Think about it. If a dangerous individual approaches you, your evolutionary alarm bells scream at you to run. But predators bypass that primal alarm system using a female buffer. Think of people like Ghislaine Maxwell in Epstein's network, or the actress Allison Mack in NXIVM. Society conditions us to view women as safe caretakers, so when an Oxford-educated socialite or a familiar, friendly actress is doing the grooming, your instinctual danger response simply never fires. The buffer creates an absolute illusion of total safety.
Section 3. The mechanics of coercion. This is where the trap really starts to close.
Once that buffer has you feeling totally safe, the psychological mechanics they use are heavily codified. Drawing straight from commercial pickup artistry, the manipulator initiates a slow, calculated erosion of autonomy, starting with a tactic known as negging. They deliver these really subtle flaw assessments to induce vulnerability. It often starts with a backhanded compliment wrapped up as helpful feedback. Something like, you know, you're so naturally talented, it's just a tragedy you lack the discipline to actually succeed. It creates this immediate flash of self-doubt, forcing the target to desperately seek the manipulator's validation just to feel whole again.
And this coercion follows a very precise four-step cadence. They combine that initial flaw assessment with intense love bombing, then an abrupt withdrawal, and finally, forced isolation. Charles Manson executed this perfectly back in the 1960s. He systematically flooded new recruits with radical affection and praise, creating this intense high. Then, he abruptly withdrew it to leave them desperate to earn it back, and finally, completely isolated them out in the desert, cutting off all ties to their friends, family, and really any outside reality checks.
Now, when you scale that terrifying dynamic up, it moves far, far beyond just a bad relationship. It becomes systemic, coercive control. This is calculated, non-physical violence. Its sole purpose is to completely dismantle a person's legal and psychological agency, breaking down their ability to make independent decisions entirely until they are completely reliant on the central figure for their own reality.
And hey, this isn't just some abstract sociological theory. In 2023, the UK Crown Prosecution Service officially updated its legal guidance. They now legally recognize love bombing as an established tactic of domestic abuse. The government itself recognizes this exact tactic as a form of calculated non-physical violence that strips away human agency.
Section 4. The bricked-up door. Let's talk about why there is no exit strategy. To understand how they stop victims from leaving once that agency is gone, we have to look at a fascinating concept called kayfabe. It's actually a term originally from professional wrestling, referring to a staged, choreographed performance that everyone agrees to treat as absolute reality. Basically, everyone in the arena suspends their disbelief to make the show work. Well, predators invite their victims into this grand, seemingly empowering kayfabe of submission just to completely bypass those remaining cognitive defenses.
It's really vital to distinguish this from consensual kink. In healthy situations, participants might explore submission through a mutually agreed-upon performance, but it is backed by real-world safety. The submissive holds ultimate veto power at all times. But in predator capture, it only looks like a simulated performance. The victim thinks they hold the veto power, but in reality, the predators are secretly eliminating all exit options. They are silently bricking up the exit door right behind you while you think you're just playing a role. Because at the end of the day, there is no safe word. The initial aesthetic of submission was really just bait to get you inside. Once you're in, that simulated performance suddenly collapses into literal, inescapable captivity.
So how do they enforce this? They demand collateral. In NXIVM's secret sorority, they permanently locked that bricked-up door by demanding blackmail material before you could advance. We're talking highly explicit nude photos, deep dark secrets, and financial assets being handed over to the leaders. They held this devastating material over the victims' heads, meaning that simply leaving the group guaranteed total social, personal, and professional ruin.
Section 5. Cults in everyday life. Recognizing the red flags around us.
You'll start seeing these exact same mechanics everywhere once you know what to look for. Love bombing and new romantic relationships, forced isolation from your peers by a controlling manager, or weaponized flaw assessments, negging, and toxic boardrooms where a boss constantly undermines your confidence just to keep you desperate for their approval. Being able to spot these red flags can literally protect you from falling into the very same psychological traps in your own personal or professional life.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. Because our legal systems still heavily prioritize prosecuting physical violence over psychological coercion, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If psychological capture is an inside job, how many modern corporate or academic environments are currently operating with these exact cult-like mechanics entirely legally right under our noses? The vault door is wide open, so we really have to ask ourselves, how many thieves are already inside?